restoring men and history. And what are we talking about today, gentlemen? We're talking about Winston Churchill and the speech he gave. But before we talk about the speech he gave an inspiring speech on October 29th, 1941 to the Harrow School. But what happened before that speech? Why is it important to you, gentlemen? What virtues did Churchill show during the war, before the war, and during his life? First of all, he had the courage to stand for the truth before it was popular. He had the courage to stand against evil and the Nazis before people were ready for it. And he actually got booed at one point for it. So how did Churchill handle difficult times? How did the British people handle difficult times? How do you handle difficult times? Can you have the courage of Churchill and the British people during this time? The diligence to continue on. So where are we at? Of course, Hitler had dominated Europe. Germany had defeated France. They had surrendered June 1940. Then we had the Battle of Britain. And then came what's known as the Blitz. The Blitz happened September 7th, 1940 to May 11th, 1941. What did we find out and learn about the British people during that point? We found out they had resolve. So let's read a little bit about it from Britannica to get our facts here. The Blitz began about 4 p.m. in the afternoon on September 7th, 1940, when German planes appeared over London. 2 hours, 348 German bombers and 617 fighters targeted the city, dropping high explosive bombs as well as incendiary devices. Later, guided by the raging fires caused by the first attack, a second group of planes began another assault that lasted till 4:30 the following morning. In just these few hours, 430 people were killed. 1,600 were badly injured. They remembered the first day of the Blitz as Black Saturday. Smoke rising from the London docklands after the first mass air raid on the British capital, September 7th, 1940. Beginning on Black Saturday, London was attacked on 57 straight nights. 57 straight nights. Between Black Saturday and December 2nd, there was no 24-hour period without at least one alert, as the alarms came to be called, and generally far more. 9 were registered on 3 separate occasions. From the start of the Blitz until November 30, there were more than 350 alerts. Think about having that many alerts. Now, this is interesting. The nights of November 3rd and 28 were the only occasions during this period in which London's peace was unbroken by siren or bomb, says Britannica. And I think that's from the New Times Paris Bureau collection and from Britannica. So after the first week of September, although night bombing on a large scale continued, the large mass attacks by day, which had proved so costly to the Luftwaffe during the Battle of Britain, were replaced by smaller parties coming over in successive waves. On occasion, forces consisting of as many as 300 to 400 aircraft would cross the coast by day and split into small groups. A few planes would get by and reach London. The Germans expanded the Blitz to other cities in November 1940. The most heavily bombed cities outside London were Liverpool, Birmingham. Other targets included Sheffield, Manchester, Coventry, and Southampton. Now, the attack on Coventry was particularly destructive. On November 14th, 1940, a German force of more than 500 bombers destroyed much of the old city center and killed more than 550. So at this time, they had already seen their friends, family die, their homes burned, bombed. You should look at the pictures. So they had lived it, right? But historians agree that this campaign was a tremendous mistake for Germany when they switched from bombing factories and military installations to London and the cities. In fact, while it, of course, affected some morale, it didn't demoralize the British people. It actually increased their resolve. So it was a failed strategy. In fact, here's a good story. The city was bombed out and all torn to pieces, but the boarded up windows everywhere of all the store shops had all these boarded up windows, and they had written a phrase above it. And this shows you the resolve and determination of the British people. So in chalk, they wrote up on the boarded up shop windows, business as usual. They were determined to go on, and they did. The Germans did not stop them. And this says it exemplified the British determination to, quote, keep calm and carry on as best they could. So, now this is a great and wonderful speech, inspiring. When you're going through turbulent times, problematic times, just read this. And I think your courage will increase and you will be inspired. Winston Churchill address to Harrow School on October 29th, 1941. Here's what he says, and I'll read it. Almost a year has passed since I came down here at your headmaster's kind invitation in order to cheer myself and cheer the hearts of a few of my friends by singing some of our own songs. The 10 months that have passed have seen very terrible, catastrophic events in the world, ups and downs, misfortunes. But can anyone sitting here this afternoon, this October afternoon, not feel deeply thankful for what has happened in the period, in the time that has passed, and for the great, very great improvement in our position of our country and of our home? Why, when I was here the last time, we were quite alone, desperately alone. We had been so for 5 or 6 months. We were poorly armed. We are not so poorly armed today. But then we were very poorly armed. We had the unmeasured menace of the enemy and their air attack still beating upon us. And you yourselves had experience of this attack. And I expect you are beginning to feel impatient that there has been this long lull with nothing particular turning up. But we must learn to be equally good at what is short and sharp and what is long and tough. It is generally said that the British are often better at the last. They do not expect to move from crisis to crisis. They do not always expect that each day will bring up some noble chance of war. But when they very slowly make up their minds that the thing has to be done and the job put through and finished, then, even if it takes months, if it takes years, they do it. Another lesson I think we may take, just throwing our minds back to our meeting here 10 months ago and now, is that appearances are often very deceptive. And as Kipling well says, we must meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same. You cannot tell from appearances how things will go. Sometimes imagination makes things out far worse than they are. Yet without imagination, not much can be done. Those people who are imaginative see many more dangers than perhaps exist. Certainly many more than will happen, but then they must also pray to be given that extra courage. to carry this far-reaching imagination. But for everyone, surely, what we have gone through in this period, I am addressing myself to the school, surely from this period of 10 months, this is the lesson. Never give in. Never give in. Never, 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 never. In nothing, great or small, large or petty, never give in, except to convictions of honor and good sense. Never yield to force. Never yield to the apparently overwhelming might of the enemy. We stood all alone a year ago, and to many countries it seemed that our account was closed. We were finished. All this tradition of ours, our songs, our school history, this part of the history of this country, were gone and finished and liquidated. Very different is the mood today. Britain, other nations thought, had drawn a sponge across their slate. But instead, our country stood in the gap. There was no flinching and no thought of giving in. And by what seemed almost a miracle to those outside these islands, though we ourselves never doubted it, we now find ourselves in a position where I can say that we can be sure that we only have to persevere to conquer. You sang a verse of a school song. You sang that extra verse written in my honor, which I was very greatly complimented by and which you have repeated today. But there is one word in it I want to alter. I wanted to do so last year, but I did not venture to. It is the line, "Not less we praise in darker days." I have obtained the headmaster's permission to alter darker to sterner. Not less we praise in sterner days. Do not let us speak of darker days. Let us speak rather of sterner days. These are not dark days. These are great days, the greatest days our country has ever lived. And we must all thank God that we have been allowed, each of us according to our stations, to play a part in making these days memorable in the history of our race. So this is a fantastic speech, right? Inspiring. Churchill had valor and he inspired a nation. The British people had valor, resolve, determination, will. And think about this. Those intense bombings, day after day, month after month, could have gone either way, right? It could have demoralized the British people. But instead of decreasing their determination, it increased their determination to win. What can you learn and take from this speech? Can you have more resolve in your life? Will your resolve increase during a difficult time? Churchill thrived during World War II, and he was made for it. And he served, by the way, Churchill served for about 60 years in government. He wrote books for money. He had to survive. Plus, he had to pay for his cigar budget. It's said that he would keep 3,000 to 4,000 cigars at Chartwell. I think he liked Romeo and Juliet's. I think he liked Johnny Walker Red Scotch. But that isn't the point. The point was his courage. He also had a quick wit. We can tell you some of the Lady Astor stories, but let's stay with this speech today. Even as a young officer, there's a story about India where he's having all these cases of wine and cigars shipped in, and I think the story goes, someone sees it and says, "What is all? Who is all that for?" That's Winston Churchill's. So the point is, though, he loved his country and he fought for it and he served. He loved the history of England and he was proud to be an Englishman. He knew the men who came before him and he understood history and it served him well. He relished it. And by the way, he didn't make a lot of money from government. Like I said, he did that through writing to support all these habits. He was a true statesman. Think of many at the top today in positions of in corridors of power in Washington, different places, how they're trading stocks and everything. Churchill made his money from writing. He wasn't there for material possessions or to make money. He was there to serve. He was there for a larger purpose than himself. Churchill had that larger purpose as a man, serving country. And he was against appeasement before anyone else. He was advocating that. Even after he came into power, many people wanted to appease Hitler and make a deal with Hitler. He did not. So what's he talking about here? Being sterner, having resolve. And notice his perspective. He sees this as great days, an opportunity, days to thank God. So think about it. They've just been come through the Blitz and the Battle of Britain and France has surrendered. And also, they had Dunkirk and got the men off the beach. So that's something to be thankful for to God, right? But in this speech, he says it's days of, he sees it as an opportunity, days of opportunity for them to play a part. You see, he sees it as an opportunity. And you have that today as gentlemen. You can use your talents for the Republic, for your family, for your friends, for Western civilization to carry it on and contribute and do your part. Overcoming obstacles, never giving in. That's what men do. So when you are on your purpose or life and life's giving you a difficult time, what do? Never give in, gentlemen. Your country is calling. This is an opportunity. Playing your part in history and never giving in. Never give in. Go forward today with courage. Thank you.